This class is concerned with approaches to learning. Now, generally speaking, trainers and tutors use a variety of techniques to help them to deliver effective learning. Students vary in their approaches to learning. Some students may learn more by listening, some by reading, some by talking and discussing. So, generally speaking, a variety of techniques are required to make sure, or to try and ensure, that the students attending a particular learning session pick up the information that is being imparted. Learning theories play an important role as they provide an understanding of the use of experience and reflection in developing new ideas and in being creative and in learning new skills. So learning theories look at learning in a wide context, not just learning in a classroom or in a training center, but learning from experience and taking the experiences into the learning situation to discuss and to analyze and to enclose, if you like, enclose those experiences within learning theories, within concepts, and understand the learning more effectively. So learning is important, and it happens continuously. It happens from our experiences in work, our experiences in life. But it also we learn from textbooks, we learn from classes, we learn from talking and discussing. We learn from a variety of sources. And what we need to do is to make sense of the information and to enable us to use it effectively and to have a deeper understanding of situations as a consequence of the learning. So learning theories help us to understand the process of how learning occurs. There's now greater understanding of how social interactions, for example, impact on learning. Talking to each other, and in today's world of modern communications with social media and so on, there is even more facility for learning and for the exchange of ideas. We also understand the role of culture and the role of experience on how we construct ideas and opinions of the world. And we have a much clearer understanding of the totality of the learning experience. So we no longer accept that learning happens in a classroom. Students are not the only people who learn. It's the wider community, it's the workforce in the company, it's the society is emerging. So to that end, everyone can be considered to be a student. And what's more, we are continuous or perennial students. We are learning all the time. Now, what is a theory? Well, a theory is an idea. I'm using very straightforward ways of thinking about theories here. But it is an idea. It's a way of thinking which is derived from a model. We start by looking at certain relationships. If something happens, if A goes first and B always follows A. If a certain situation happens, then something else happens. We start to develop a model. Why is it that B always follows A? Why is it that a certain situation, B, has followed this particular situation, A? Why? Why does one come after the other? So we develop a model. And this model enables us to develop a theory. The theory tries to explain why is it that something happens after something else. And the theory then articulates the relationships and how the processes fit together. The theory attempts to explain what's happening. So we have a much deeper understanding of the situation. We now know that when something happens, something else will happen. So if A happens, B will happen. But we also know why this is the case. Because we have a theory, we have an explanation. Of course, it's very important to be critical of the theory and to try and find alternative explanations and alternative ways of thinking about the situation. So we're constantly looking out for new ways of thinking and challenging our beliefs in certain relationships. Learning theories are tried and tested through research and practical experience. For example, they explain how individuals are motivated and the process of effective learning. But when we have a theory, we are constantly trying to find ways of improving the theory and understanding it more deeply, and also criticizing it to try and find an even better account for what's happening, to try and explain the situation even more precisely. So we are constantly revising what we know and what we think we know. And we are constantly trying to find explanations that will help us to improve our particular situation. So within a company, for example, the manager may be interested in how to motivate the workers more effectively. And the manager will therefore have certain theories of motivation and will be looking to try which theory works most effectively within that organization. So this type of learning, this type of approach is very important, and it's something we do all the time. Trainers and tutors try different strategies in order to aid effective learning. So in a learning situation, we have learning theories. We have theories of how people acquire information and how they get a deeper understanding of the relationships that are being taught. But the managers and tutors and the trainers and all the people involved in the training exercise will be constantly looking for better ways of explaining and delivering the message that they're trying to get across. So the tutors will be looking to new ways of delivering the message. If we were to go back in time, they would probably have a blackboard and a piece of chalk. Or they may have a simple bench with some simple equipment to illustrate how a particular machine works or a particular component works. Now, they may have it as a video, it may be on the computer and interactive, it may be produced in full color, and there may be frequently asked questions to answer questions that the students may think of even after the session is well over. Perhaps weeks later, when the students were reflecting on the training session, they may come up with questions and now have the capacity and the facility to go back and look up frequently asked questions, perhaps on a website, and get answers. So the whole approach has changed. It doesn't mean it's going to stop here. It will continue to change. So the tutors are constantly looking for what we call best practice, best teaching practice. And that's an evolving process. That's one that goes on and on. Now, in terms of learning theories, well, we have behavioralism, we have a cognitive approach, and we have an experiential approach. And in the rest of this session, I'm just going to talk about each of these three approaches. So I'm going to start with behavioralism, the first one. Now, behavioralism is based on the view that an individual's behavior can be molded to achieve desired outcomes. So individuals' behaviors can be changed. And when the managers, let's say within a business, want to achieve certain outcomes, the workers are trained to produce the desired outcomes, and they may be motivated to do so by bonuses and rewards. So their behavior in a sense, has been molded to achieve those outcomes. This is based on the principle of conditioning. Our behavior and our attitude is shaped from our external environment. So we, as individuals, we see the situation, we see what's required of us. If we do the job well, if we do the task well, we get rewarded. If we don't do it well, we get into trouble. So we have positive reinforcements and negative reinforcements. Now I'll talk about those in a second again. But for the moment, we learn from our experiences and our behavior is changed according to the conditioning we receive. If we're praised for doing a good job, we want to do it the same the next time, so we get more praise. That's positive reinforcement. Behavioralism is the only learning theory that can be studied as an individual's behavior is observable. So we can study behavioralism. We can see how effective the reinforcements are, the positive reinforcements and the negative reinforcements are. We can see how effective people respond to this. So if somebody does a good job and they are praised or receive a bonus, they will be happy and they'll want to do the good job again. So we can observe that. And that means that behavioralism can be observed. We can observe the effects of the conditioning. In order to mold an individual's behavior, they need to be positively reinforced to achieve the deserved behavior or attitude. And this is what I was talking about a few moments ago. So positive reinforcement is praise or a bonus or some expression of well done. So it's positive reinforcement is using words like well done or you did a great job or congratulations. And it could also include certificates and promotions and bonuses, and so it's positive reinforcement. So it's trying to get the individual to constantly produce good work, desirable outcomes. Negative reinforcement encourages positive behavior. If someone's not doing the job well and they're being criticized, they may improve to try and avoid the criticism. So negative reinforcement can lead to positive behavior. But when the negative reinforcement is removed, the behavior may slip back to being unacceptable again. So somebody is making some component in a company, they're not making it very well, they're criticized, the manager watches them continuously and criticizes them and tries to get them to change. So eventually they will change. But they'll only change because of the negative reinforcement, because the manager is watching them and criticizing them. When the criticism stops, they may go back to doing a bad job again. With positive reinforcement, they may continue to do a good job because they like being praised. They like being seen as one of the good workers and one of the good people. So positive reinforcement tends to be long-running. Now the advantages of behavioralism, well, easier to identify and mold behavior as it's observable. We can see the outcome of behavior. When people are doing a good job, we can see it. We can see that they are applying themselves, they're trying hard, they're producing good results. So the good results may be the product of praise and bonuses and certificates and rewards. So we can see the outcome of the impact of these reinforcements on the quality of the work. So we can observe it. So that's an advantage. The disadvantage, well, this idea does not take into account the emotions and the thoughts and the feelings of the person. We're only looking at what we can see. And what we can see is the behavior of someone. We can see their approach to a certain situation, and we can see how they apply themselves, and we can see the outcomes. These are observable. What we can't do is observe emotions and thoughts and feelings. We don't know what's going on inside the person's head. We can only see what's been produced. And that's a disadvantage, because the real processes, in many respects, are going on inside the person's head. We're only dealing with what we can see. And it only focuses on rewards and punishment. So it's a very narrow approach. It doesn't deal with bigger issues like culture and changing patterns in society and wider social pressures, and it only deals with rewards and punishments specific to a particular task. So it's a very narrow approach to dealing with situations. We take a worker who needs to perform a particular task, the worker is trained, and then there's positive reinforcement applied. So they're told if they do a good job, they will be rewarded in the following manner, which they then produce a good piece of work and they are rewarded. It's very narrow. It's just focusing in on the task and on the piece, on the rewards that were offered. We don't know what's going on inside the person's head. Now let's turn to the cognitive approach. Well, this is the opposite of behavioralism. The cognitive approach involves the study of the mind. It considers mental processes, how we think, how we perceive the world around us, how we use logic, and how we learn. So all of these are going on inside of our heads. So they're not observable. They're what's within our heads, and it's how we see the world, how we consider certain situations, how we use logic, and how we think, and how we learn. And as I said, these are not observable. Its main focus is based on how we receive, construct, and implement information. So it's how we deal with information, how we process information. But that processing takes place inside our heads, where it's not observable. So it's not like behavioralism. Unlike behavioralism, cognitive theory uses techniques to understand and improve memory, problem solving, and aiding in the learning process. So there are approaches within the cognitive area that tries to deal with memory and improve memory, and look at problem solving and how people go about problem solving and so on. But the actual process of problem solving takes place in the head, where it is not observable. Compared to behavioralism, in which the aim is to mold human behavior through reinforcement, the cognitive approach is scientific. The cognitive approach tends to be more scientific. The individual's mental processes are analysed through undertaking memory tests and other psychometric experiments. Measurement experiments, if you like. Psychometric, measuring the mind. It could be anything from looking at ink blots to trying to solve puzzles, to word associations. There are many tests that can be applied, and this gives us a more scientific way of trying to find out what is happening inside the head. But they're all very imperfect processes. We can't truly see what's inside someone's head. So we are dealing here with a very difficult topic. Over the years, cognitive theory has gained greater importance over behavioralism, because behavioralism looks at the external being, not the internal processing of information. Behavioralism looks at how individuals act, the outcome of the actions, whereas the cognitive approach is dealing with what's happening inside the head. So it's radically different, doing a completely different job. Now, the advantages of the cognitive approach, well, it's a scientific approach. There's been a lot of research conducted in the area. All sorts of testing individuals, looking at their feelings about certain situations, showing them pictures and having word association tests and logical tests and so on. And nowadays, with greater use of technology, scanning is sometimes widely used to flash images in front of the individual and scan their brain at the same time to see which parts of the brain are activated, so that the mapping of the brain can be done more effectively, and there's a greater understanding, or an attempt to get a greater understanding of what's happening inside the person's head. So it's a science which is constantly evolving, like all the other sciences, I guess, but it's constantly evolving, it's constantly improving, using technology to get a greater understanding of what's happening. It can be applied with behavioralism to gain a better perceptive understanding of human behavior and development. It can improve our perception. It gives us a more perceptive view of the person, because if we couple it with behavioralism, if we think that the individual always does this if they receive that bonus, they will always work better, they will have better performance if they are praised, and that's always the case. Let's say that's been observed and a particular individual always works better if he or she is praised, then that may be a clue to how their brain is working, and it may help the more cognitive approach to try and determine what types of rewards in particular will motivate that person. Perhaps there are rewards which may not be necessarily well done, or congratulations, or a bonus. There might be rewards in terms of promotion, or rewards in terms of acknowledgement, wider acknowledgement. So the cognitive approach can add an extra dimension. It can be worked with behavioralism. The disadvantage, well, the cognitive approach tends to ignore the biological processes. It's focused on the brain, it's focused on what's happening to us and how we think and how we respond to certain situations, but it by and large does not incorporate our health, our general situation, the ones we find ourselves in. It could be that we are emotionally upset because we've just lost our job, or because we're financially in a bad way, or we've had problems within a family situation, or whatever. So the biological processes tend to be ignored, and it's very difficult for people working in the area to get a very wide, embracive view of what's happening in someone else's head. Cognitive experiments can be subjective and difficult to analyze. Taking even inkblot tests, different people may look at them and come up with different ideas. And who's to say which one is exactly right? Or looking at scenarios, someone may look at a scenario, a particular situation, and analyze it in a particular way. Someone else may look at it differently. Well, if it's not clear-cut, if it is ambiguous, then there is subjectivity in the picture. There is it is interpreted subjectively. So this type of experimentation and this type of work has to be done very carefully. Experiential learning. This is quite popular in management and business studies, and it's one that is often discussed in the context of business and management. And the leading exponent of this is Cobb, and the Cobb's experiential learning model. He developed the model in 1984. Now, according to this view, the learning process is based on an individual's experience, which is then transformed into knowledge. So we learn from our experience. I suppose at the outset it's important to say that this applies to certain areas of knowledge. Generally speaking, we do not learn higher mathematics by experience. We don't experience the mathematics. We learn them from books and textbooks and from classes and lectures and thinking. But for a lot of learning that we do encounter, it is experiential. We learn from our experience. We learn from what's happened to us and the more practical side of our life. And we learn from that how to fix machinery and how to act under certain circumstances, because we have learned from experience. But the experiential approach is not a panacea. It's not a way of learning everything. There's still room for more traditional styles of learning. But in terms of experiential learning, he explained that there are 4 stages in learning which follow from each other. Now these 4 stages are: we have some sort of concrete experience. I'll just put the cursor onto the screen. We have a concrete experience there. So in other words, we experience something. Something happens and we experience it. We see something happening and we look at it. We have an experience of it. Then we think about the experience. We reflect on it. We think back. What happened? What was that experience? What caused it? Why did it happen? What was it? And when we've thought about it, we've reflected on it, we draw up an abstract conceptualization. We try to think, okay, every time this happens, will the following happen? Or is it just a one-off? Did it happen just once? Was that experience a unique experience? Did it happen just once? Or if this set of circumstances arises again, will the same outcome occur? So we are starting to conceptualize about the experience. And having conceptualized, we may then experiment to see if we're thinking is correct. Can we model the situation and try and see if the same situation would come out again, if similar circumstances applied? So we try to experiment. And of course, if we experiment, it gives us more concrete experience, which we then think about. Which leads us to more conceptualization and so on. So it's a learning cycle. It's a cycle of making observations, of getting experiences, of thinking about the experiences, reflecting on the experiences, then conceptualizing, thinking about the relationships that we saw and why the relationships exist and how they are connected, and then experimenting to see if what we understand to be the situation is in fact true. We perform experiments if we can, which gives us more concrete experience, which we can then reflect upon, and we then integrate that into our conceptualization, which improves our conceptualization. But just in case, we would carry on to get more evidence if we can. So it's a learning cycle that we're going through all the time. And all the time in the practical world, the world in which we live, we are getting experiences. All sorts of experiences, positive and negative. And all the time we are reflecting on those experiences. And we're working out what caused it and what the experience was. And we're watching out the next time a similar set of circumstances arise, we will apply our thinking. We'll say, the last time this happened, from our experience, this is what the outcome was, therefore, this is likely to happen again. So we've learned from our previous experiences. Now, the concrete experiences. Well, the concrete experiences could be our emotions. When something happens, it has an emotional effect. When something goes right, it has an emotional effect. We feel happy. When it goes wrong, we feel sad. When we see something working, we may be curious as to why it's happening. When we see a machine doing something, we wonder how the machine works, perhaps. This is in a sense an emotional response. We're working out emotionally because we're curious. That's a part of our emotions, and when we finally figure it out, we're happy. And if we don't figure it out, we're perhaps sad. So we have a whole range of emotions related to concrete experiences. And we learn from the experience. When something happens, we join together the cause and the effect. And that gives us a view of the experience. We also have the ability to understand and communicate people's and our own feelings. Because we need, when we have an experience, to perhaps discuss this with others, if possible, and get their experiences as well. And we need to get our own feelings about the situation sorted out so that we know that in similar circumstances in the future, if these arise, then this will be the outcome. And we're not surprised because we have already encountered it. So we are, if you like, emotionally balanced in the future when the circumstances arise and when this instance occurs in the future. We also have reflective observation, where we observe something. That's the starting point. We observe a particular situation, something happening. We make observations. And we try to view the environment from different angles. We try to look at the situation from different perspectives to see what happened. Try to work out, were we best positioned to make the observation, or perhaps others making the observation had a better perspective, so we need to talk to the others to see what the experience was. So we try to look at the environment from different perspectives, and then we reflect on it. We think about it. It settles in our heads. We let it settle in our head. We go and do other things, but all the time it's there, and all the time we're processing it. And in quieter moments when we're sitting alone or not doing very much, we start to think back about that particular experience. So that if we were confronted with a similar experience in the future, we would know what to do, or we know what is likely to happen. Now, abstract conceptualization, well, this is to do with thinking. We've had the experience, now we need to think about it. We need to try and work out what was the cause and the effect. How are they linked? What's joining the two together? It's the ability to use logic and analysis to solve problems and overcome a situation. So we're using conceptualization to analyze the relationships that we experienced, that the observations that we made. We need to analyze them to see how are they connected. So abstract conceptualization is what we're going to carry with us into the future. This is our understanding of the situation. We've had an experience, we've made observations of that experience, and now we understand it. We understand what happened. So again, if confronted by similar circumstances in the future, we know what to do. That takes us to active experimentation. Well, this is action. This is trying to reproduce the situation so we have a clear understanding. If the same circumstances arises in the future, the same outcomes should occur. It could be a process of influencing individuals and getting the job done. So active experimentation could be getting others to collaborate, to work on a particular task in a certain way because alternatives have failed. And now, through active experimentation, best practice has been found, or at least a better practice has been found than the one used before. So now it's important to influence others to use that better practice. And we also have some sort of ability to measure risk, because we're performing experiments. It may be just mental experimentation, thinking about the situation and thinking about the conceptualization we've had, and now trying to think what would happen if a similar situation arose in the future. And because we have a conceptualization, we're able to assess the probability of something happening, some outcome. We've observed some situation, we've seen the outcome of that situation. Now we think, if it happened again, what's the probability of the same outcome arising? So we use it to assess risks. Cobb implied that learning styles are not inborn personality traits, rather behavior development through background and experience. So Cobb was relying a lot on, in his learning theory, on experimentation and conceptualization based on experience, looking at experiences and trying to work out as much as we can from those experiences. Now, I think many people in the business and management field would say undoubtedly that is true, that many times we are looking to our experiences as a source of learning. But as I said earlier, there may be some circumstances where the learning is not efficiently provided experientially. If we give someone a computer and tell them to write a piece of Java code without any training, without any instructions in a classroom, they may get the job done, but it may take them a long time. They will learn from their experience, the fact that the code fails over and over and they've typed in the wrong commands and so on. But by fixing the commands, they will learn, and they'll learn from that experience. But it may not be very efficient. It may be more efficient to have a more didactic form of tuition. So experiential learning is good in many circumstances, but it's not the only approach that we should consider. Cobb introduced 4 learning styles based around his 4-stage learning cycle. These are diverging, assimilating, converging, and accommodating. Now, having said that, I'm not going to deal with these here in this session. These are the topics of a separate video which I'd want you to look at elsewhere in the module. So I'm actually going to leave it at that for the moment and say that's all we're going to deal with in this class on the approaches to learning. So I'm going to leave it at that and say thank you for watching.